afternoon, Year 4. This is the introductory session for our geography that we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks. The overall theme for today is called Inside the Earth, which gives you a bit of an idea what we might be looking at. It is something completely new, so there will be some new words in here that you won't have encountered before, but there will be enough within this to give you a good indicator about what everything is. So let's have an explore together and see what we're going to be doing. So the slides will help to build up your geographical vocabulary. They'll give you the knowledge to complete the task that's included on this week's webpage. It is new learning, so keep coming back to it, keep looking at the pictures, keep referring to the information that I'm putting alongside it, and it will enable you to complete today's work. So first of all, I'd like you to have a look at this picture and imagine you were digging this hole. So what would we find if we were to dig really, really, really deeply into the ground? So there's 3 questions on here as well that I'd like you to just have a think about. So what's at the bottom of the hole? What different things might you find as you are digging? Where would you end up? So how would you go about answering these questions? Do you already have some ideas? Maybe you've done some finding out in a non-fiction book previously about what might happen if you were to dig really deep down. If not, we're going to do some virtual digging together now. So first of all, let's have an explore underneath the ground. Even when we're thinking about soil, so if we refer back to our rocks and soils learning previously in science, we just did a little bit of digging and we had a look at what we might find within the soil in the ground, within the school environment. Now, if we were to dig a bit further, even within the soil layers, there's an awful lot going on. So you can see here on the diagram on the picture, there are 4 different layers that are indicated. So you've got the humus layer, the topsoil, the subsoil and the bedrock. And within each of those layers, there's going to be something very different. But once you've got through the soil, what else would you then find? Well, this is what we're going to be exploring in more detail today. But I just want you to keep this first picture in mind, first of all. And as I've said, keep referring back to the different slides. You can keep going backwards and forwards through them and just see what's going to help you with today. So let's have a look at the layers. So if we were to chop through, I think of it as being layers of a cake. So each layer serves its own purpose and they might be different thicknesses as well. So you can see from this image here that you've got 4 specific layers. If we were to chop a section out of the earth, we would be able to identify 4 layers within it. Each one's got its own relative thickness. If we were to dig deep, we would find these layers. We're going to find out more about each one though, because as I said, these are 4 new things that we're learning about today. But refer to these labels. These 4 words here, crust, mantle, outer core and inner core. Those 4 labels are going to be really important with what we're doing today. And we're going to find out more about those individually now. So, the crust, that's the outer layer of the Earth's surface. So, first of all, it's important to recap on the soil layers. So, we know that we've got topsoil. So, in the topsoil, that's where all the roots are for the various plants, including grasses and flowers. The roots go into this topsoil layer because they absorb the water and the things that they need. As we go through that topsoil layer, though, we get into a soil area which is now stickier, it's lighter in colour. This is what we call the subsoil. It's made up of clay and some rock, so it's a very different consistency and texture. At this point, you can see the roots of bigger things like oak trees. They grow really deep here so that they can take up the rich nutrients that are found within the subsoil layer. As we go further down through subsoil, we begin to find things like fossils, potentially, because we're getting near the bottom of this layer. And after subsoil, we reach bedrock. It's hard, it's things like granite, limestone and basalt. So within the crust, there's an awful lot which is going on. Okay, but have a look at that crust in terms of its thickness. It's not actually very thick compared to the other layers, but even still, we've got an awful lot that's going on there. So let's keep going and see where else we can dig down to. So the next layer that we go on to, you can see on the diagram, it's a much thicker layer. We've reached the mantle. Okay, so when we've gone through the crust, which is the thinnest layers, we then get to the mantle. It's a layer of liquid rock magma. The diagram shows you that it's much thicker, okay, and it will give you more information about how thick it is in one of the later slides, but you can see that it is very different. And from the description, we know that it's different in terms of its consistency as well. It's hot liquid rock. So after we've gone through the mantle, that really, really thick layer, we then reach the outer core. Now the word outer tells you that there's going to be something else still as well, doesn't there? So just keep that in mind. But when you finish digging down through the mantle, we reach the outer core. It's a layer that's a mixture of liquid magma and rock. The diagram shows you it's not as thick as the mantle was, and again, we'll give you more specific information, but as a general overview, it tells you this layer is made up of two things. It's mostly liquid magma, but there are some rockier elements within it as well. We then move into the inner core. That's right at the centre. You can see that it's this bit right here, right in the very, very, very centre. When you finish digging down through the outer core, we reach the inner core. This is the hottest layer. It's a large hot ball of iron and nickel, so those two metal words, which melts within the outer core to form the magma. So it's the very, very hottest part. So let's see if we can get a bit more information now. So this gives you a bit more detail here. So the crust, that very, very outer layer, it's a thin outer layer of cold, hard rock that covers the Earth. It's between 10 kilometres and 90 kilometres thick, so different thicknesses at various points covering the Earth. The next layer that we go on to was that really, really thick layer. It's extremely hot rock that often flows like treacle, so that tells you it's that magma state, and it's 3,000 kilometres thick. So you can see just from the numbers, it's much, much, much thicker than the crust was. Once we move down into the outer core, it's mostly made of iron with some nickel. So again, that's those two metal words. It's over 4,000 degrees centigrade. It's mostly liquid, but it does have rocky parts. The outer core moves around the inner core, so it's flowing, and it creates the Earth's magnetism, which is why things are the way they are on the surface. Once we get into the inner core, it's made of iron and nickel. It's the hottest layer at over 5,000 degrees centigrade. It melts the metals that are within the outer core and to form magma. So that's why it's mostly liquid in that outer core, because the temperature that's from the inner core below it. So within today's learning, it's comprised of two separate parts. So part number one, I would like you to draw onto this diagram, okay? Use colour for it. I'd like you to imagine that you've chopped a section out of it, like what you've seen on the previous illustrations, and that you can draw on the layers, so maybe sketch them lightly first and then do it in different colours to indicate the four sections. So it's like chopping a section out of a cake. You would then see each of the layers that was within that cake. I want you to do the same on this image here. You don't need to colour in the whole of the surface, because it's actually what we're going to have is what we call a cross section. So we're going to do that. Use 4 different colours, one for each of the 4 layers. So when you've done that, you then come down to the second part of the activity, okay, which says write a fact or description for each layer. So refer back to the information that you've been reading through and that I've talked you through here, and I would like you to write a fact for each layer or a description of it. So it's up to you, decide depending on how you would like to do it. Now, it's a writing task, so I expect it to be neat, I expect it to be cursive. If you have used the geographical vocabulary, copy it carefully, okay? All of the terminology is on here, it's all spelt correctly, so I expect it to be the same within your work for today. So check it all, maybe write it out on scrap first or on a piece of paper that you've got to hand before you copy it onto here. You can see you don't have a huge amount of writing space, so make sure you're really coherent with what you're putting. On the colouring part, make sure it's not scribbly, make sure it's done properly, as the expectations would be in school. When it's completed, take a photo of it and make sure that your grown-ups have then emailed it across to me. See if it helps you get yourself onto Fab 5 for today. That would be fab if we had a geography piece on there for tomorrow. I'm looking for some really good quality work, and most importantly that you've understood what these 4 layers are within the Earth's makeup. Okay, so do that to the absolute best that you can, and I look forward to seeing your work later. Thank you, Year 4.